Down 3-1, down by 24 in the second half, on the road, facing elimination. Most teams fold right there and start thinking about the offseason. Detroit? They didn't panic for 1 second. They came out swinging and flipped the whole game upside down.
The Detroit Pistons were not down 3-2. They were down 3.6 games to 2.
That's right.
To the Orlando Magic.
Right.
They were this close to becoming a team that will live in infamy. A 60-win team that loses decisively in 6 games to an 8th seed. And for them to come back, a team that does not have playoff experience, did not have won a playoff series, for them to come back from 3-1, win decisively in the final 3 games, I think that says a lot about their competitive character, their coaching.
What makes this even wilder is where this franchise was just 2 years ago. The Pistons lost 28 straight games, the longest losing streak in NBA history. Every night felt like a disaster. They weren't being taken seriously by anybody. Around the league, Detroit became the joke nobody could ignore. Now look at them. 60 wins. Central Division champs. The #1 seed in the East. And they just crushed Orlando by 22 points in a Game 7 like it was personal. This isn't some cute underdog comeback story anymore. This is a dangerous team that finally figured out how to hit back harder than everybody else. And if you really want to understand why the NBA is suddenly watching Detroit differently, you gotta understand how ugly things got before this turnaround happened. The 2023-24 Pistons were a complete mess. They finished 14-68, dead last in the league. But honestly, even that record doesn't explain how brutal the season really was. The real nightmare was the streak. 28 straight losses. Think about that for a second. Nearly 2 full months without winning a single game. National media stopped talking about them unless it was to clown them. Other teams looked at Detroit on the schedule like it was a free win. Fans stopped showing up. The whole franchise turned into a meme across the basketball world. And the worst part? That losing streak wasn't some random bad stretch. It exposed a deeper problem that had been dragging this team down for years. Detroit hadn't won a playoff series since 2008. Their home playoff losing streak reached 11 games, another record nobody wanted attached to their name. A whole generation of fans grew up without ever seeing the Pistons matter when the playoffs came around. This is the same franchise that gave the league the Bad Boys era. The same organization that had legends like Rasheed Wallace, Chauncey Billups, and Rip Hamilton grinding teams into dust every postseason. But over time, Detroit became the example people pointed at when talking about wasted rebuilds and failed plans. The crazy thing is, the talent was always there. They had a former #1 overall pick leading the backcourt, young athletic bigs, lottery picks everywhere. On paper, it looked like the foundation should have worked, but every season turned into the same ugly cycle. Injuries piled up, players missed games, rotations changed every month, coaches got fired, front offices kept resetting everything before anything could develop. Nothing stayed stable long enough to grow. Detroit wasn't building a real identity. They were just stuck spinning in circles year after year while the rest of the league moved forward. Then last season finally gave fans a small sign that something could be changing. The Pistons finished 44-38 and made the playoffs. They lost in 6 games during the first round, but at least they looked competitive for once. It wasn't some massive breakthrough yet, but people could finally see a little life in the franchise again. Of course, the doubters still weren't buying it. A lot of people kept saying, "We've seen this before. They'll regress. They always do." But once the 2025-26 season started, something immediately felt different. Through the first 20 games, Detroit exploded to a 16-4 record, the best start in the Eastern Conference and the best 20-game start in franchise history. The same team that got embarrassed with 28 straight losses was suddenly running through the league like they had something to prove every single night. And here's the part that shocked everybody. It never slowed down. Detroit finished the regular season 60-22, locking up the #1 seed in the East. Their first 60-win season since 2005-2006, back when Chauncey Billups was leading one of the toughest teams in basketball. That's a 20-year gap, 20 years between elite seasons, 20 years of losing, bad decisions, disappointment, and people counting this franchise out. Now suddenly, the Pistons are back in the middle of the championship conversation, and the rest of the league can't ignore them anymore. 20 years of waiting. That's how long Detroit fans had to sit through disappointment before finally taking back the Central Division crown. The last time the Pistons finished on top was 2008. Since then, they watched the Bulls, Cavs, Bucks, and Pacers run the division year after year while Detroit stayed stuck in the background. Not anymore. This season, the Pistons didn't just win the division, they controlled it. And the scary part for the rest of the NBA is how complete this team suddenly looks. Their defensive rating finished at 109.7, second best in the entire league. Teams couldn't score comfortably against them anymore. Every possession looked exhausting. Every game turned physical and frustrating. Then you look at the net rating, plus 8.2, third best in the NBA, behind only Oklahoma City and San Antonio. Their point differential had them sitting with the true championship favorites. This wasn't a lucky team sneaking out close wins every night. Detroit was beating teams down and making it look routine. And right in the middle of this breakout season came the moment that changed everything for Cade Cunningham. November 10th against Washington, Cade dropped 46 points, 12 rebounds, 11 assists, and 5 steals. Read that stat line again because it still sounds unreal. 46, 12, 11, 5 steals. Nobody in NBA history had ever put up those numbers in a single game before. Not Michael Jordan, not LeBron James, not Magic Johnson. Nobody. For the first time in any era, somebody actually pulled it off, and it happened in Detroit. Now back to Cade, because his rise this season has been insane. He got named Eastern Conference Player of the Month for October and November, then became an all-star starter for the first time in his career. At this point, he's basically a lock for all NBA first team. And remember, this is the same player people were doubting not long ago. After injuries, losses, and nonstop criticism, people started questioning whether Detroit made the right choice, taking him number 1 overall in 2021. Now those same critics are real quiet. Cade finally became exactly what the Pistons believed he could be. A franchise superstar, a legit top 10 player in basketball. And this wasn't some random hot streak against weak teams either. Detroit built a real identity around him. But here's what makes this team different from past seasons. Cade isn't carrying dead weight anymore. For the first time in years, the roster around him actually fits together. The chemistry finally makes sense. Guys understand their roles, the offense flows smoother, and the defense looks connected every single night. This whole turnaround starts with 3 players who figured out how to maximize each other's strengths. Cade Cunningham is still the engine driving everything. 23.9 points, 9.9 assists, and 5.5 rebounds per game. All-star starter, future All-NBA first-team selection. But honestly, the regular season numbers don't even tell the full story. The real version of Cade shows up when the pressure gets heavy. He dropped 39 points in Game 1 against Orlando, then followed it up with 27 points and 11 assists in Game 2. After Detroit fell behind 3-1 in the series, Cade completely took over. That's what real stars do. 45 points in Game 5 to save the season. Then 32 points and 10 assists during the Game 6 comeback after Detroit was down by 24. Every big moment, Cade answered louder and louder. Cade Cunningham made history when Detroit needed him most. He became the first Pistons player since Isaiah Thomas to put up 30 points and 10 assists in an elimination game. That's legendary company right there. And honestly, that stat says everything about his transformation. Cade used to get labeled as a guy putting up flashy numbers on a losing team. Not anymore. Now he's closing games, taking over playoff moments, and dragging Detroit through pressure situations like a real superstar. That's the difference between a talented player and a franchise leader. Then you've got Jalen Duren, the Bull. 19.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, and the number that should seriously scare the rest of the league. 65% shooting from the field. At only 22 years old, Duren finished top 5 in the entire NBA in field goal percentage. Against Orlando during the regular season, he averaged 17.8 points and 11 rebounds. And this isn't just a center catching lobs anymore. His physicality changes games. He attacks the paint like it belongs to him. Detroit doesn't just rebound now. They completely control the inside. Teams get bullied under the rim, and Duren is a huge reason why. Then there's Ausar Thompson, the disruptor. 2 steals per game, constant pressure, non-stop chaos for opposing guards. He's become the best perimeter defender Detroit has had in over a decade. His defense lets Cade take more risks in passing lanes because Ausar is always covering ground behind him. Their defensive switches stay sharp because of him too. That's a major reason the Pistons finished with the second-best defense in basketball. And here's the scary part. All three of these guys are 24 or younger. Three young stars, three totally different skill sets, and Detroit has them locked in for the future. But the biggest difference between this Pistons team and past versions is something Detroit fans have been begging for forever. A supporting cast that actually makes sense. Tobias Harris finally looks comfortable in his role. He's not being asked to carry the offense anymore. Now he's the veteran scorer, floor spacer, and locker room leader this team needed. Duncan Robinson stretches defenses the second he steps on the floor. Karis LeVert gives them another creator off the bench when the offense slows down. Isaiah Stewart brings toughness every single night and sets the defensive tone. Then the younger guys like Ron Holland and Dennis Jenkins come flying in with nonstop energy that changes momentum fast. That's what real contenders have. Stars at the top, reliable role players in the middle, bench guys who can swing games with effort and hustle. For the first time in nearly 20 years, Detroit finally has the full formula together, but everybody knows regular season success means nothing once the playoffs start. May basketball is different. The pressure gets louder, the mistakes feel bigger, and over the last 2 weeks, Detroit got thrown straight into chaos. The Pistons opened the playoffs against the Orlando Magic in the first round. On paper, it looked like an easy matchup. The number 1 seed versus the number 8 seed, a 60-win team against a squad that barely escaped the play-in tournament. But the series immediately turned ugly. Game 1 at Little Caesars Arena became a disaster. Orlando walked into Detroit's building and stole home court with a 112-101 win. Cade dropped 39 points, but nobody cared because the Pistons still lost, and instantly, the doubts came flooding back. People started saying, "Same old Pistons, they'll find a way to blow this." Game 2 changed the energy completely though. Detroit won 98-83 and finally snapped their brutal home playoff losing streak. Their first home playoff wins since 2008. 11 straight playoff losses at home were finally gone in one massive night. The arena exploded. Fans were screaming like years of frustration finally disappeared all at once. The series was tied. Confidence came back. Momentum started shifting, then Detroit headed to Orlando, and things got ugly again. Game 3, loss, 113-105. Game 4, another loss, 94-88. Suddenly, the Pistons were down 3-1 to an 8th seed, and every fan in Detroit felt that horrible feeling creeping back in. They'd seen this story too many times before. Different roster, different year. Same painful ending starting to form. Down 3-1 against Orlando? At home? The pressure became unreal. Down 3-1 against an 8th seed? Most people already considered the series finished. That wasn't a playoff battle anymore. It looked like the beginning of another Detroit collapse. But this team refused to follow the script. Game 5 in Detroit became Cade Cunningham's takeover moment. Facing elimination, he completely exploded for 45 points. He went a perfect 14 for 14 from the free throw line and knocked down 5 threes like the pressure didn't even exist. Every big possession, Cade answered louder. Paolo Banchero tried to keep Orlando alive late, but Cade outdueled him down the stretch and carried Detroit to a 116-109 win. The Pistons survived, but the pressure was still massive heading into Game 6, and then came the game that changed the entire season. Detroit walked into Orlando facing elimination again. Hostile crowd, road environment, down 24 points in the second half. At that point, almost everybody thought the series was over, except Detroit didn't quit. They completely flipped the game into chaos. The Pistons outscored Orlando 55-19 in the second half. Seriously, 55-19. That kind of collapse doesn't even look real during the playoffs. Cade finished with 32 points and 10 rebounds, becoming the first Pistons player since Isaiah Thomas to put up 30 and 10 in an elimination game. Detroit turned a 24-point disaster into a 93-79 victory, from getting buried to winning by 14. It instantly became one of the wildest comebacks of the postseason. Suddenly, the series was tied 3-3, and now everything came down to a Game 7 back in Detroit. And honestly, the Pistons didn't just win Game 7, they embarrassed Orlando. Final score, 116-94, a 22-point blowout with the entire basketball world watching. No drama, no last-second finish. Detroit completely controlled the game and made it crystal clear who the better team was. Cade delivered another superstar performance. The defense suffocated Orlando from start to finish, and the young core played with confidence way beyond their age. That's what shocked people the most. This didn't look like some inexperienced team getting lucky. They looked calm, focused, dangerous, like they'd already been through years of playoff wars together. This isn't the same Pistons franchise people used to laugh at. Now when Detroit gets hit, they respond even harder. Down 3-1 against a dangerous Orlando team, they ripped off 3 straight wins to close the series. That's not random talent. That's mentality. That's belief. That's championship-level toughness starting to show up at the perfect time. And now the second round is here, which should make Cleveland very nervous. Because the Cavaliers aren't about to face a tired team hanging on by a thread. They're about to run into a Detroit squad that just discovered it can survive almost anything. For years, this franchise was the NBA's favorite joke. Every season felt stuck in the same cycle of losing, rebuilding, and disappointment. 3 weeks ago, they were one loss away from another collapse. Now, the entire Eastern Conference suddenly has a real problem on its hands. Think about how insane this turnaround really is. 2 years ago, Detroit suffered the longest losing streak in NBA history. Now, they're a 60-win powerhouse that just won a Game 7 by 22 points. And the scariest part for the rest of the league is how young this core still is. Cade Cunningham is only 24. Jalen Duren is 22. Ausar Thompson is 23. Ron Holland is just 20 years old. This isn't even their peak yet. This looks more like the beginning of something the East might have to deal with for a long time. For over a decade, teams around the league ignored Detroit because they didn't matter anymore. That window just slammed shut. The Pistons aren't some feel-good comeback story now. They're not begging for respect anymore either. They've become exactly what contenders hate seeing rise up in the standings. Young talent, elite defense, confidence, toughness, and playoff scars that already made them stronger. Detroit isn't coming soon. They're already here. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hype the video and subscribe.